Welcome to the Cup of Joe Wrestling Show.
Cup of Joe Wrestling Show
with Joey Harris. A podcast for the wrestling fan on the go. So take your favorite beverage of choice and join Joey as he takes a look at some of the biggest shows on the WWE Network.
Welcome, everyone, to the Cup of Joe Wrestling Show. I'm your host, Joey Harris, and we are broadcasting from makeshift studios in the shadow of South Central Virginia. You can follow the show on Twitter and Blue Sky at Cup of Joe Pod. Email the show at cupofjoewrestlingshow@gmail.com. If you would like to support the show, I'm at paypal.me/cupofjoepod. I'm also on Cash App and Venmo at TheJoeyHarris. And, of course, patreon.com/babykangaroomedia. For bonus episodes of the Cup of Joe Wrestling Show, the Joey Harris Super Show, the Green Room, Book Club Baristas, and so much more, just $5 a month for hours of extra content. And if you use the promo code Joey, you'll get 20% off your first month. Today, I am honored to have the man who can be heard on Stick to Wrestling, the Outdated Wrestling Hour, the Outdated Entertainment Hour, and so much more. Steve Gennarelli. How are you, Steve?
I'm well, Joey, and thank you for the invite. It's great to be here with you and get to know you a little bit. And I did hear you recently on the Bob Smith show, the Outdated Wrestling Hour, and I really enjoyed what you had to offer. I'm glad to be here today.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for doing this. And I'm just going to jump right into it. Since we are a wrestling podcast, how did you become a wrestling fan?
Well, the first time I had seen wrestling was in the early 70s. It was around 1973 or 74. And I believe it was the IWA wrestling. It was Mighty Igor. It was the Love Brothers, Mil Mascaras, Tex McKenzie, Eric the Red, wrestlers like those. And it was on Saturday night at 7 p.m. locally in Binghamton, New York, where I'm from, which is near Syracuse. And I made a point to watch it every week, but it wasn't like I didn't get the hook, like the hook. Right. But a few years later, 1976, I was watching Saturday night. The show from New York would air at midnight, WOR, and it was WWWF in those days. And my brother and I probably watched like a NHL Rangers game on at 8 o'clock. And after that was over, there was probably like SCTV and probably like harness racing from Yonkers. And after all of that, the wrestling comes on at midnight. And it was just a case of getting like hooked immediately. From the first segment, Vince McMahon is interviewing all the heels, and then Bruno comes out and he interviews him. And I'm just hooked immediately. And so from that point forward, every week at midnight, I was in front of that TV. I found out that we had local wrestling on the ABC affiliate, which aired right after American Bandstand on Saturday afternoon at 1:30. And I can remember it was like roughly a year after that one Saturday I'm watching that local wrestling for Binghamton, and something happened that had never happened before. Vince McMahon is talking about my hometown. It turns out there's going to be wrestling in my hometown, and I'm blown away. And so about a month later, they had a card come to Binghamton. I went to that card, and again, my life was changed forever. It's just like you get hooked into wrestling, and you want to soak it in and absorb it and do everything you can to learn more and to get more into it.
I listen to so many different podcasts, and one I listen to is called TV Guidance Counselor.
Okay.
With a comedian named Ken Reed, who has basically every issue of TV Guide ever, and he and a guest go through it. And his theory about Saturday Night Live is your favorite cast is the cast that hooked you when you were around 13 years old.
Okay.
And I think it's the same thing with wrestling. I don't know if it's 13, but it's right around the age from like 7 to 15. It's whatever wrestling hooks you then. That's the wrestling that you grow up on and that you prefer.
Well, your theory must be dead on, because I discovered it at 12. So your theory is spot on. So being that you asked me that, Joey, I'll ask you the same question. What wrestling hooked you in? I'm just curious.
I had been thinking about it. I remember I was born in 78, and I remember not really watching wrestling, but I remember like being aware of who Hulk Hogan was and the Junkyard Dog, mainly through the cartoon
Right?
that they showed in the mid 80s. And then I remember watching it must have been in the late 80s for several weeks in a row until I think they took it off. I think it must have been NWA Worldwide. Um, and enjoying it, but it not really hooking me. And then my best friend would watch wrestling off and on, and it wasn't until it was when I was 13. He let me borrow a copy of WrestleMania 7 that he
Okay.
and I watched that for some reason. I don't know if I was at home from on sick or on spring break or something.
Hmm.
And watching that and just getting hooked in mainly through Randy Savage and the Ultimate Warrior, that career ending match and just everything around that. And I think it holds. I was 13. So
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
there you go. That's very interesting. And did you go back in time and try to look at the older stuff after that, or like what? How did your path go?
Absolutely. I'm from a small town in northern North Carolina on the Virginia border, and we didn't have cable. And so I got one hour at that time. I'm looking for all the wrestling I can. I got 1 hour of the WWFC show. It was Wrestling Spotlight.
Right.
And so it gives kind of the overview of what happened in the A and B show during the week. And I
Right.
lived every week for that 1 hour until about a year later, the local NBC affiliate started carrying WCW Worldwide the hour before that hour. So I had now 2 hours.
Wow.
It was the week that Jesse Ventura joined Worldwide in
Okay.
'92. So,
Very cool.
and then Steve, it was like I could not consume enough wrestling at that point. So I'm getting the magazines and I'm trying to, asking friends, do you have any old tapes, and renting the old tapes. And I'm now trying to find uh, everything I can about it. And if you had told 13-year-old me that you could now have hundreds, if not thousands of hours at your disposal, my head probably would have exploded.
Same here.
Yeah, but now I feel like I'm like, oh, at the time I'm like, didn't think there would be such a thing as too much wrestling, but you just become overwhelmed
Hmm.
with it. If you watch just WWE, 3, 5, 7 hours a,
Right. Right.
a week, and that's not counting their premium live events or when they have Saturday night's main event, and not to
Sure.
mention either 4 or 5 hours of AEW,
Right. Right.
and then if you spread out Ring of Honor, MLW, TNA, it's just so on and so forth. It's just,
Hmm.
but I find myself being drawn back to what I enjoyed growing up, and
Right.
even before I was growing up. And that's actually my next question to you.
Sure.
The Booker's biggest tool is the eraser.
Okay. All right.
Jim Ross told me that actually.
Okay.
Is there anything that you would use your eraser on in modern wrestling?
Oh yeah. I guess there'd be a lot, really.
Yeah.
And, uh, you know, again, we're gonna sound like old fogies here, but I just miss the way wrestling used to be, in the sense of there was a psychology to it. I mean, that's what you always hear about, the psychology. Jake Roberts had great psychology. This one had
Right.
great psychology. Um, so basically, in these matches, the ones that you and I grew up on, you really could watch and you could understand the motivation. Why are these guys feuding? Why is this guy hurting? Why is this guy vulnerable? Why is this guy strong? Everything made sense. Now you watch the show, and it's like everybody's trying to do the same thing. It's like the guys who are the cruiserweights and not really getting the big push, they're doing the same kind of wild, crazy stunts that the main eventers are supposed to do. and it's like everybody on the show is competing to top each other. It's not like the old days of the NWA where, I mean, from the way I understand it, Eddie Graham had a theory, the way a card should be built. In those old days, the first match you're not supposed to do anything. Keep it in the ring. Keep it simple. Just have wrestling holds. Just have a match, and then with every match that followed, you would do a little something more or add more. I mean, at the end of the match, at the end of the night, at the end of the card, I mean, if the guys in the preliminary matches have done everything, what's left for the main event guys to do? I mean,
Right, right.
there's nothing left, and so I mean that part of it disturbs me as far as like today's watching the show, because it's like it just seems like they're all trying to do too much, and there's no order, there's no rhyme or reason. It just seems so. And I don't like the fact that it's so dangerous. It just seems to me like whether it's AEW or WWF, these people are like literally risking their lives just because they want to say I had the greatest move or I had the greatest moment on that show. But I mean, if you're having a show, twice a week or whatever, or 3 times a week, every week, I mean, what does it really matter? Because next week they're going to forget about it anyhow. So,
Right, right. No, I agree with that. And there's two things that I think about from what you just said. Number one is, oh goodness, 2018. I'm at a local. I lived in Maine at the time. I'm in Portland, Maine, at a local wrestling show, and Darby Allin is on it.
sure.
And another wrestler picks him up, Steve, and literally throws him about 3 feet, and he hits a concrete slab and just falls down. And they're like, "Oh, he does this all the time." And I'm like, I know he's getting paid good money now, but I'm sure he wasn't then, and he's still doing the same things. And after a while, it's like I understand that's what he wants to do, but I don't want to see it because I don't want to see anyone get seriously hurt.
Right, right.
And you talk about also like the opening match, that Eddie Graham formula.
Right.
I watched because I do the Cup of Joe on Patreon with a buddy of mine, where we kind of like watch different shows. And for that, the next show we're doing is the Worlds Collide that they just had this past
Yeah, I've
Saturday.
checked that out too. I haven't seen it yet.
And so I was telling my wife about it because I'm like, they've got Money in the Bank tonight. And I promise her, I'm like, she's not into wrestling. Occasionally she'll sit down and watch it, but I'm like, I'll make a deal with you. If I can watch this, I'm not going to watch the Money in the Bank as it happens. And she said, that's fine. But I was telling her, I'm like, WWE owns AAA now, and the shows are actually taking place down the street from each other. So I know there's a lot of people like getting from one place to the other.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, watch. And she's watching the final match with me. And as soon as the 3 count hits, everyone jumps up and they're filing out because they've got to get over to where they're having Money in the Bank. Well, there's apparently there was a lot of riots and protests in that area this weekend of Los Angeles about the ice raids and all that. Right. So they start Money in the Bank. The place is not nearly full yet, and they're starting off with the women's Money in the Bank match. Now, if you're going back to Eddie Graham, if they'd have thought, well, let's put something in there, maybe not the women's Money in the Bank match, because they had, you could visibly see a lot of empty seats.
Sure.
So say, let's build up to some of these, like, the women's match maybe in the middle, and not start out with it. I understand they're like, we want to start hot because it's more of a TV production now, but these people they literally couldn't get in yet. They're filing in as they're climbing the ladder and taking all these big spots.
Sure. Yeah. Wow.
It's just crazy. Yeah. Is there anything from wrestling history, if if Steve had a magic wand and he's like, all right, let's get rid of this, what would it be?
I think, again, you got to respect history. I mean, it's there for a reason, but I guess the stuff I would get rid of would have been all the cheesy things like, RoboCop, RoboCop in wrestling, and Giant Gonzalez, Anything that was just like a desperate gimmick to get attention and to draw new fans in. I mean, there were a lot of them. Those are the two that just comes off the top of my head. But when you do stuff like that, and I'm sure you're in Virginia, you're the Carolinas. I mean, I'm sure those long-term diehard Jim Crockett fans, when they see stuff like Giant Gonzalez or they see RoboCop with Sting, I mean, they're just ready to walk away from the business and never come back.
Right.
They like the traditional wrestling. They like the Four Horsemen. They like, if they go back farther, they like Johnny Valentine. They like Wahoo McDaniel. They like the tradition of the NWA. But to have these gimmicks and stuff that the WWF might try to do, but maybe even do it worse. I don't know. Those types of things I would probably put on my magic wand and wish them away, I guess.
Wrestling fans are creatures of habit, and I know, and people try to fight me on this, but there was a segment of the fan that when they got to that last Nitro, they never watched wrestling again because
Right.
they could take, even as bad as some of later stage WCW could be, they could trace it back to the Mid Atlantic and the Crockett
Right.
area and all of that, and they're like, that's the wrestling that I grew up on.
Sure.
And it's just not for me anymore. So they turned off their TV and went and did something else on Monday nights.
So some people are like that. I mean, to me, if I was in that group, even if I was mad about it, just the fact that, like, say, Cody Rhodes emerged in recent years, and he definitely has a skill set of a really solid wrestler. Somebody like that would have brought me back, even if I was bitter about the end of WCW. I would have come back to watch Dusty's son. I would have rooted for him. Um, but but that happens in every sport. I mean, I know I have friends of mine. We're as diehard baseball fans as we are wrestling fans, and with the Yankees, that's my team. But
Mm-hmm.
I had a friend of mine I grew up with when the baseball went on strike that time back in, I think, what, 94, and there wasn't a World
94, yeah,
Series.
right.
This one friend of mine who was a huge Phillies fan, and him and I would every year we'd buy all the magazines. We'd preview every team. We talk about everything. I mean, this guy, we're still really good friends, but he's never watched a baseball game since. And I guess there are people that are diehard like that. That they're either super hot or super cold or whatever. And I can understand where those fans are coming from with wrestling. Or the end of Nitro was the end of an era for them. But I guess I'm just not built that way. I would never say no. Never going to watch this again. I mean, there's times I've been away from wrestling, but I always seem to come back to it
Right.
in some way. I mean, I don't think I'll ever be like the kind of fan I used to be, where I knew everything and was really so engaged with it. But I think I'll always enjoy just putting it on, even if it's just for 20 seconds. I just enjoy to see what they're up to.
I'm the same way, and there have been times where, like, I'll keep up with it online, but I'm not watching it
Mhm.
actively. But you talk about those fans coming back for Cody Rhodes. I think Cody, when they did the whole finish the story,
Right.
from him coming back at WrestleMania 38, I liken that to Dusty showing up at Starrcade 83, even though he wasn't on the show. It's
Sure.
like, now I'm here. And then WrestleMania 39 was like Starrcade 84. He doesn't win it. And then Starrcade 85. At this time, WrestleMania 40, they get it right, and Cody finishes the story that his
Right.
dad didn't get to finish in 85. That's the way
Right.
I've looked at it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and I think I think a lot of fans were waiting and waiting and waiting for that to happen. I mean, it probably should have happened the year before, but I
Right.
guess at times these promoters like to make the fans wait for whatever reason. But I'm glad that they did finish the story for Dusty's legacy and also for the family. I mean, it meant a lot, I'm sure, to Cody and for the family and all the fans.
I was there last year. My friend that I watch wrestling and talk wrestling with, we went to WrestleMania 40.
Really, really.
Yeah, night one, Steve. It is the coldest I've ever been. I guess actively, like
That was
I
Philadelphia, right?
Yes, I paid to be that cold. In other words, yeah. Like I've been colder. I lived in Maine for 7 years. I've been colder, but not for that long of a time
Wow.
on purpose. But,
Joey loves wrestling. That's all I can say.
yeah, and night 2 was just an electric moment to be there. My friend's favorite wrestler is The Undertaker, and when that gong hit that night, he said it was like he couldn't feel his arms or he couldn't feel his legs because he would never thought he would get to do that. But you also brought up your friend with the baseball strike. I know a lot of people like that. I have someone else that I used to work with who said, I guess, that there was also an NHL strike at one point.
Right, that's right.
She knew fans just like that. They're like, okay, I'm done.
Yeah, I can't understand that mentality. I mean, more power to them if you feel that strongly about it. But
Right.
I mean, I love baseball too much. I love hockey too much. I love wrestling too much to just say that's it. I'll never come back. I mean,
right. And my mom is a Yankees fan. Me and my sister are Red Sox fans.
that's okay. All right.
Yeah. But what do you think of the Yankees bats?
The Yankees bats, I'm really happy with their bats. This team is kind of like all over the place. They're some days you could just make a case that they're definitely one of the favorites to win everything. But then there's other days it's like, well, maybe we'll limp into a wild card spot and we'll see what we can do. I mean, the Dodgers still seem to be the toughest team on paper and in reality. But everybody else, I mean, the Mets, the Red Sox, the Yankees, the Phillies, you go down the line, there's lots of competitive teams. And the way baseball is, I guess, if you get hot at the right stretch of time, you can, win the whole ball of wax.
Okay. Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see, I think, especially as we get beyond the All-Star break.
Oh yeah, everything's going to change. I mean, it just seems like the season's almost like two seasons. You have the first part, the second part. You'll see a lot of players that were cold in the first half coming to life, and vice versa. But hopefully, our teams will do well, and we'll both make the playoffs for us.
Yeah. So, what? I guess, is there anything that keeps you engaged in today's wrestling? Is there anything that you're particularly excited about?
Well, I mean, you got to remember the podcast that we do with John McAdam and myself, Stick to Wrestling with John McAdam. Our topics are usually older topics. We're always doing the 70s. We're doing the 80s a lot. 90s once in a blue moon, maybe in a blue moon 2000s. So I like to just have my pulse on the business and from a distance as far as just knowing what's going on. I mean, believe me, I check the websites every day. I check all the sites that would give me updates and news, but it's not like I'm invested to the point where I need to watch it or I need to really invest time into it. I mean, the amount of time I watch wrestling during a week is probably like less than 10 minutes.
Right.
I spend a lot of time on the internet researching and reading things and what have you, but actually watching it very little. And I'm like you. I mean, I found that my niche in wrestling is the older stuff because it just makes me happy. It gives me satisfaction. And I mean, I'm at the point now where I probably spend a lot more time watching things like shoot interviews and listening to podcasts with people like yourself and learning from people like yourself. I mean, learning and listening, hearing what other people have to say. To me, that's as exciting and as interesting as anything these promotions could put on because I like to hear people's viewpoints and I like to hear like when you were telling me about your background in wrestling, how you got into it. I mean, I like to hear those stories because it fascinates me much more than watching, two guys on top of a ladder falling through the ring or whatever they do today.
Right. No, I get that. My buddy Tyler that I do the Patreon show with is the one that we're the ones that went to WrestleMania, and night one it ends and we're waiting to file out, and we always laugh because there's these people behind us and they say, hurry up, we've got to go, there's another show that they're going to that starts at midnight.
Really?
And yeah, and there was just a group of shows all weekend long. A bunch of indie groups were running, and I'm like, we just sat through 4 hours of wrestling. And I told him, I'm like, if my hotel was across the parking lot and the wrestling was in between that, I would walk right by it and go to the hotel. So
yeah. I mean, part of me would love to be that adventuresome, I guess, and go and invest that much time into it. And of course, I love the historical aspect. Like I'd be the kind of a guy that would love to go to the Hall of Fame and see all the hoopla of the Hall of Fame and hear all the speeches and what have you. And that would be more for me because I like anything historical. But I mean, to be honest with you, and I'm sure your life is similar to mine. I mean, I work a lot of hours. I work not only a 40-hour job, but I probably work like 10 to 12 hours of overtime every week. So I'm really tired from that. And my wife, being that she's like managing the household and doing what she does and keeping the house clean and nice. I mean, it is nice to have a little time with your wife, and once you're done with all that working, so when we finally have like maybe an hour or two just to ourselves, I mean, I'd like to watch a show that she might like to watch. We might watch a movie, we might watch a TV show that she likes, a documentary. She knows I love wrestling. She knows I'm obsessed with it. She'll watch if it's something good, like she'll like with Dark Side of the Ring as an example. I wouldn't make her watch all of those, but if I knew there was one that she may kind of appreciate more than the others, I'll have her sit down and watch it with me. And
right.
she's a really cool person because she grew up here in Florida. She grew up in Fort Myers. She uh, very familiar with Gordon Soley, very familiar with Dusty Rhodes, and so she grew up in our community. She understood how important wrestling was, and so when we met, when we had our first date, and I think wrestling probably came up on our first date, she was very cool. She, like most ladies would have just ran for the hills, but she understood, wrestling is a sport. It's like anything else, and she understood a lot of people devoted to it. A lot of people love it, and so she enjoys it with me once in a blue moon, but we're just like anybody else. We just like to have a nice quiet life and appreciate a movie, appreciate a concert, or listening to something different. But wrestling does find its way onto our TV periodically.
I'm the same way. I work in college housing.
Okay.
So I kind of live where I work.
Okay.
And so that can be a 40+ hour job in
Oh,
itself,
sure.
plus running 2 podcasts and 3 YouTube channels and a Patreon and all of
Wow.
that. And so
Wow.
I wake up every morning at 5 o'clock, Steve,
Wow. Wow. You're even up longer than me.
to make sure that I get everything in. But I'm like you, when she's a teacher, so when she comes home, we want to have that time
Yeah.
to get together. And
Yeah.
so
It's nice.
we like our TV shows, or movies that we
Sure.
like to watch and do things together.
Yeah.
You have to have that good balance
Yeah.
of
Yeah. We need
things you both
balance.
like. Yeah. Do you have any good wrestler meeting stories, like wrestlers that you've met?
Yeah, I actually do. That's a great question. I'll tell you probably the most unique wrestler meeting story. Uh, my dad was a florist, and he had a flower shop. And uh, so one day I'm in the flower shop. This happened to be the day after a WWF card, and this was 1987. And I helped my dad out. I was working for him periodically when he needed me. And I was the kind of guy that would just take orders, take phone orders or FTD or what have you. And like if somebody came in and said, "Hey, I need to, send a bouquet of flowers to my wife who's across country," I would help them do that. So one day, again, this is the day after a wrestling card. I'm in there and I hear this deep, deep voice, and I'm there, and I walked up to front to see who it was. And even though I wasn't supposed to know who it was, I knew it was Bill Eadie of Demolition and the
Right.
former Mass Superstar. I mean, I could just tell by his voice and what he looked like, and I just went up to him and shook his hand, and I helped him with his order. He was sending flowers to his wife in Atlanta, Georgia, And when we were done with the business part of it, I talked to him just a little bit for like about maybe 90 seconds and just said, hey, I was there last night. I enjoyed the match. I think they wrestled the Killer Bees, him and Darso, the Demolition Team, and he was very, very nice. But before it was over and done with, he was gone, and it was funny. I must maybe I had another question or something I wanted to ask him. I went outside, and he was long gone. I don't know. He was just like like so fast and got out of there so quickly. But a really, really nice guy, a first class guy, and it was so nice and thoughtful of him to order the flowers for his wife, even though he looks like a real tough guy. He was a really nice guy, and it was funny. About let's see, I guess roughly about 20 years later, I saw him at the big Wrestle Reunion deal that we had in Tampa here. He was one of about 70 legendary wrestlers that was here, and I think I regaled him with that story. Hey, I waited on you at the flower shop 20 years ago, but he was just a really, really nice guy, and he's I think he was a school teacher himself at one point, and he's just a classy guy. I mean, he's one of those wrestlers that always had a stellar reputation, and I can see why he has it. He was just a very nice, friendly guy.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I've heard that about him, and
Mhm.
I've also heard from other friends of mine who have gone up to him. They say, "Hey, how was it if you name a card in the year and who they were wrestling? He could tell you something about that day. He's like, oh yeah,
Really?
it was cold that day, or like, yeah,
Wow.
we were doing something, or they were late and we had to stall for time, or another match went on. Yeah,
He's got that Marilu Henner type memory where he can just recall the day. I guess that's
right,
amazing.
right. That's awesome. Yeah.
Well, how
Um,
about you? Was there anybody like that for you that you met and you were blown away by, or?
I tell you what, every time that I have met him, I met him a couple of times now. Jim Ross has just been fantastic to me.
Yeah.
And it could be like, you see these things, or if you pay for money and they'll give you like, I guess exactly what you asked for. Like they'll take the picture or they'll sign the thing and they'll
Mhm.
just keep it going. But he took the time every time that I have talked to him, he'll take like 10-15 minutes and talk with me. And I'll remind him of something we had talked about before. Like I met him and I asked him, I said, we had interacted on Twitter, and I asked him, was the Fort Bragg Clash of the Champions show the hottest building he's ever broadcast in? He said absolutely. He sweated through his socks.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
And he got in trouble with the TBS executives because in the middle of it, he said he'd like to have a Domino's pizza and a Coors beer because they were the sponsors. And his bosses at TBS is like, you can't talk about drinking alcohol on the air. And he's like, they're a sponsor. And he's like, it got all the way up to
Really?
Ted Turner. He's telling me this story, and at a meet and greet, and Jeremy Borash, he's now with WWE, but he was with TNA at the time. He was
Right.
helping him. He had also worked for WCW, and he had never heard the story. He was fascinated by it. He goes, "What did Ted say?" Ted said, "What are we doing here? We're trying to sell wrestling and we're trying to sell beer. Go back to work," or whatever it was. And about 6 months later, my father-in-law came down, had an attack of Bell's palsy. And so I reached out
Okay.
to Jim Ross on Twitter, and he
Okay.
gave me a lot of good advice
Wow.
for that.
What a classy guy.
Yeah. And then this past Thanksgiving, they have WrestleCade in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, every Thanksgiving weekend. And so I went down there and reminded him of that. And so he asked me how my father-in-law was doing,
What a classy
and
guy.
yeah, and I had reminded him that, and he goes, yeah, because it takes no time at all, and it costs absolutely nothing to be a decent human being. So
Yeah. Yeah, I like Jim Ross a lot. When I see stuff like Ric Flair, calling him names on Facebook, it just disgusts me, honestly.
right, I'm like, Rick, just put down the iPhone or get away from the computer for a
Right,
while or whatever it is.
right, right. Yeah,
Yeah,
he's making himself look bad.
right. That last Thanksgiving when I went down there, I made it a theme day. It was I called it a Starcast day. So I went, or Starcade day rather, not Starcast.
Okay,
That's
okay,
Conrad's thing.
yeah.
Um, Starcade. So Jim Ross, and then I went and saw David Crockett, who was also excellent. I was asking him, I'm like, who, when they were having it from two different locations, who chose the locations? And he said it was his brother. He decided which matches went in which places. And he goes, I'm the one in the truck trying to hook up the two places. And he goes, I have ADHD. So you would think it would be chaotic, but it was actually perfect for me. He goes, he was dialed in for it. And then I met JJ Dillon, who fantastic. And then I met Dennis Condrey, who was also really great.
Well, that's cool. That's really cool. It doesn't surprise me. I mean, JJ Dillon, I just know he is a class act, and his wrestling book is one of the all-time great wrestling books.
That's what we talked about. I said, I'm so sorry I didn't bring my copy. I would have gotten him to autograph it. And he said, thank you.
Great.
He said, I'm really proud of the book because he said, I really didn't put anyone down. I was just expressing my opinion and what happened to me. So,
well, the way I look at that book is it's like it's as close to a real history book on wrestling. I mean, sure, it's his story, but if you read the book the way it's intended to be read, I mean, you're reading about the great stars of the 60s and 70s, territorial guys like the Brunos and the Sheiks, and then you're getting into the later 70s and 80s, and you're hearing about Dusty and Flair and the Horsemen and WWF, and I mean everything. I mean, it's like he's like a walking history of everything that happened in wrestling in that great time period. From he was a fan in the late 50s, he was a referee in the early 60s, wrestler in the early 70s and onward, and it's such a great book. Anyone listening to this show should find that book and learn so much about our great sport from JJ Dillon's book.
I would agree with that. So tell me how you got into, because, and I can tell you this, folks, and I'm not just saying this because Steve is here. I've said this to other people. Any show that Steve is on is going to be a great episode of that show.
I don't know about that. No.
So like, I like the entertainment hour stuff that you've done with Bob Smith, like whether it was the cartoons or the TV shows or Star Trek and all of that. I've enjoyed all of them. And then your episodes with him of the Outdated Wrestling Hour, when you all have done the top tag teams and the top stars of the 70s and 80s and all that. So tell me your history as a podcaster. How'd you get into the podcasting game?
Well, that's a great question. To just come out with the answer, about 9 or 10 years ago, I started a new job, and I didn't get the best shift available. I actually got probably the worst shift. I got the midnight to 8 a.m. shift or something similar to that, and that's kind of like a graveyard shift. And so while I was working and there was lots of downtime, there was time to listen to podcasts and things like that, because if you're working that kind of shift, you don't want to fall asleep. You need to stay awake. And roughly around that time, 9-10 years ago, was the beginning of wrestling podcasts. There never really had been any up until that point. And the first one that I gravitated to was Brian Last's 605 Super Podcast. And I thought his show was really neat because not only did he find these oddball characters from wrestling's past who were people on the fringe, like the guy who could get out of that hold. I can't remember.
Right.
You know the one I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, he could get out of that shooter's hold, and nobody else could do it. And there were all kinds of other episodes like that where somebody who was kind of on the fringe of wrestling but had a great story to tell would come on, and I always loved that. And then the other part of that show, which was so funny, is he'd have people on like Scott Cornish do the Boogeyman and Jimmy Valiant, and he'd have Howard Baum would come on and do Magnificent Morocco, and it wasn't just impersonations. It was them like like him talking like Laura Alfred Hayes, or Laura Alfred Hayes being drunk, or it was all kinds of scenarios. But anyhow, I found that show really, really fun and delightful. And I soon found out that Brian Last had this network of other shows. I'm looking into these other programs, and John McAdam had this one, the Stick to Wrestling, and his co-host was Sean Goodwin. And I would listen to those, and I kind of liked those a lot too, because they were more probably more focused on the Northeast and WWF, which I grew up on. And John and I had done a little bit of corresponding with each other over the years, just a little bit like on Wrestling Classics or maybe Kayfabe Memories. We would compare notes, like he'd have a list of these were Bob Backlund's top 20 challengers, and I would give him my list, and I'd have the top 20 Bruno challengers, and he would give me a list. So anyhow, we when I found out he was doing the podcast, I said, hey, this is really nice, and blah blah blah, and he invited me to participate. So I did like a guest shot on one of those, and as time goes by, his partner Sean Goodwin had to drop out, I think, due to scheduling. So I came on board, and I'm now kind of his semi-permanent, semi-regular co-host, and it's just a lot of fun. I mean, he comes up with most of the ideas, but I just try to go along with it and have fun with it and to participate. And the shows seem to get really people enjoy them, and we get lots of feedback on our Facebook group. There's a lot of people that leave comments and stuff, and lots of nostalgia there, and it's all good. I mean, I haven't regretted any of the time. I mean, I wish we were making money out of it. We're not.
Right.
It's just more or less for fun, but it's a lot of fun, and it keeps my brain stimulated, and it's nice to kind of review a lot of the best times of our life, which was watching wrestling, and so we enjoy those times, and I'm sure you do too, Joey.
Absolutely. It's one of the highlights of my week. In fact, if it gets to be like Friday at noon, I start to look for it, and I'm like, yeah, that's what's going to take me into Saturday.
I'm glad to hear that. Thank you for that compliment.
And getting into, and like I told you at the beginning, I was not listening to it at the time or watching it at the time, but going back and looking at it now, I still get the nostalgia, like when you all are doing the WWF from 40 years ago,
Right.
each month, and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that. And as someone in college, Steve, I spent a lot of money with John McAdam. I sent him a lot of money
Okay.
for wrestling tapes.
Yeah, he really has a reputation from those days, Mr. Tape Trading, and you mentioned him earlier, so I have to mention Bob Smith. Bob Smith, the former editor of PWI, and I know he's had you on his show too. He's just a phenomenal guy. We become good friends, and as good as you can be long distance. But
Right.
he's just a really, really nice gentleman, and we have a lot in common as far as our love for wrestling. And he's big into baseball, and but he's just a very thoughtful, nice person. And I love doing his show when he calls upon me to do it. And we do these things, like you say, with McAdam. Once in a while, we'll get together. We'll do the top 50 tag teams of the 80s, or we'll do the top 100 wrestlers of the 70s or the 80s. I mean, those are kind of like fun little exercises to get your brain going, and to sit around and with the guys and kind of commiserate and come up with these rankings. It's a lot of fun. Yeah, sometimes it's time consuming, but it's just a lot of fun, and it's, again, a nice way to be nostalgic and look back and really enjoy the times of wrestling that we really, really enjoyed.
My wife was out of town a couple of weeks ago, and I just started listening to Bob's show about a year ago, and I'm trying to catch up with all the back episodes.
Oh, sure.
And I gotten up to your top 170s show
Right.
a couple of weeks ago. I'm here by myself, and I'm cleaning the apartment.
Sure.
And I'm going around, and I'm like, Bruno's got to be number one.
Right.
Bruno's, and I'm like, yep, all three of you, Bruno's got to be number one.
That's right.
With that, and so I really enjoyed that. But I'll tell you something: how you got over with me, my friend.
Let's hear it.
This has been well, you'll probably know better than I was, but it has not been lately. It was on, I think, the Stick to Wrestling group you had talked about, I guess, a vacation you and your wife had took.
Okay.
And you're standing at the end of a driveway, and I'm like, I know that driveway. That's the driveway from The Sopranos. And
yes.
And so I had just watched the show for the first time through. Like I knew,
really,
like I'd heard about it, and I knew like all some of the major plot points. I'm like, it's time for me to watch it, and I had just finished it not long before then. And I see the two of you there, and I'm like, this is my type of guy.
Oh, thank you. It's just funny. I mean, there's two TV shows that I'm really, you know, besides Star Trek. I mean, Star Trek's in this special spot in my heart because that's, you know, as a kid you love that. But being an adult, there's two shows that really stand out to me. One is The Sopranos. The other is Mad Men, which I think is a brilliant, brilliant show. A lot of the same writers from both shows did both shows. So if you haven't seen Mad Men yet, I recommend that for you, Joey.
It
I think
is on my list. I have not seen it.
you would love it.
I think I've seen the first episode, but it is definitely on my list
Yeah.
of things to watch. But I did see like in going through it, I did see, I guess the creator of Mad Men was like a writer or an executive
Yes.
producer on The
You're right.
Sopranos. Yeah,
You're right. Yeah, there's definitely a symmetry between the two shows. You'll get that feeling. I mean, The Sopranos is a lot darker, but Mad Men can get pretty dark at times too. But they're both very cool in the sense of they can be very dark, they can be very funny, hilariously funny, they can be very dramatic. I mean, those shows to me, they're really like pieces of art. They really have a little bit of everything. And my wife and I, we feel the same way. So we periodically will say, hey, let's do the watch Sopranos or let's watch Mad Men. And you know, it takes you maybe a few weeks to get through them because you only maybe watch one a night. But it's a nice little journey to, you know, revisit these things. And because the shows are both so well done, you
Mhm.
find yourself finding new things every time you're watching it. Like, oh,
I'm
I've watched
sure.
The Sopranos 7 or 8 times, but I never noticed that before. Or same with Mad Men. You see things that you just never picked up on, and that's how good they are because there's always surprises there.
Absolutely. So, what other interests do you have?
What other interests do I have? Well, it's as much of a geek as I am about wrestling and about Star Trek and about The Sopranos and Mad Men. I'm a huge Steely Dan fan. They were a big group in the '70s.
Mhm.
I guess you would think I'm kind of a yacht rock captain or something like that. I mean, Steely Dan isn't really yacht rock, but I guess they've been classified as that. But I really enjoy their music, and I like a lot of that '70s type music, the mellow music, Stevie Wonder, you know, Little River Band, groups like that, but I do like newer groups too. Like we saw Red Hot Chili Peppers here in town about a dozen years ago, and they were phenomenal. I enjoyed that. So it doesn't always have to be yacht rock; it can be other types of music too. I mean, to me, there's nothing like going to a live concert as long as you like the music. I mean, it's to me, it's just like going to the best wrestling show you could ever go to. A live concert just makes you so happy, and
Right.
it just gives you goosebumps and chills just enjoying it that much.
Nice. Yeah. Well, Steve, I have kept you for a while now, and I want to be a good steward of your time. But before I let you go, go ahead and plug any and everything you have.
Oh, well, thank you. I really appreciate that.
Mhm.
So my main thing I want to push is the Stick to Wrestling with John McAdam, which is part of the Arcadian Vanguard Network. And as Joey said earlier, it usually comes out on Friday. It's coming out later in the day. I don't know why, but it comes out later in the day on Friday. But it's out there, you know, for your enjoyment. And Bob Smith has been kind enough to have me on the Outdated Wrestling Hour and the Outdated Entertainment Hour. So I want to push those as well. Joey's been on those shows. He's been great on those shows. And I would definitely recommend those to anybody that like wrestling or entertainment.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Steve. You can follow me on Facebook, Threads, and Instagram at the Joey Harris. If you like the show, please leave a review on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, or your preferred podcast app. I would really appreciate it. We can also be found on Spotify and YouTube. Just search for the Cup of Joe Wrestling Show, and don't forget to hit subscribe. Steve, thank you so much again for joining me. And this is Joey saying so long from the heart of
Thanks, Joey.
Virginia.
The Cup of Joe Wrestling Show is a production of Baby Kangaroo Media.